right? This is Shukaka Rao from GMS, Virginia. Coming back at you again. Lord's will you be edified. First and foremost, I want to give our praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bashem Yahushua, Bashem Kakadash. Second, I want to give double honors to the apostles of GMS that rule over our beloved elders and teachers. And peace, blessings, salutations to the hopeful elect out there that's tuning in. Hold on, bear with me real quick. Peace, blessings, salutations to the hopeful elect. It consists of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Hispanics, Native Americans. And Lord's will be edified. This is going to be about the so-called Tainos, the Indians of the Hispaniola, the devastation, the atrocities, and I'm going to bring up just a little bit of scriptures behind it. Because let me see something. Let me get this real quick. I believe it's in 2nd Edges 13. So 2nd Edges 13. Trying to see where it starts. Bear with me one moment. All right, so 2nd Edges 13 and 40. Because history explains that after the Assyrian captivity, Northern Kingdom, the 10 tribes were basically just lost, basically disappeared, which that's complete nonsense and bullshit. Let me get this in Jeremiah before I can bring this out. Jeremiah 31. And it's funny because at camp yesterday, you had a Ephraimite woman come up, the casual Christian missionary concept, casually, come up as if they're lost. They don't know what's going on, like they never seen us before. And then the question they ask is very similar to what a Christian or a person that's just drunk off the wine of the American philosophies, salvation's for all, universal, etc. But let me get this. All right, here it is. So let me see. My fucking eyes are, man, we gotta get the hell up out of here. All right, so Jeremiah 31. 35. So thus said the Lord, which giveth the sun for a light by day, and the ordinances of the moon and the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. If those ordinances depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. Thus said the Lord, if heaven above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth searched out beneath, I will also cast off all the seed of Israel for all that they have done, saith the Lord. So we still see the sun, we still see the moon, and we still see the stars, and the heavens have not been measured, or the foundation of the earth. So they're still here, baby. It says, it's back to 2nd Edges 13 and 40. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. For the Most High Power Yahweh then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. For though through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and you can go read about the journeys of King Solomon and the Hamites, which it took them. Um, Basically, it were routes that people they knew how to get here, and this path took roughly 3 years. It would take a year and a half to get there, and a year and a half to come back, and it would bring back a lot of um, goods. Because you can clearly see America has goods. I mean, may not be the best of resources, but they had goods. And the same region is called Asarath. I forgot. It's been a while. I think going to mean. I'm not gonna go into it. I don't want to confuse or mess it up. But let me see. Then dwelt there that, if I'm not mistaken, I think it means bitter. If I'm not mistaken. No, I think it's a Murray go. Salaki. Verse 46. Then dwelt they there until the latter time, and now when they shall begin to come. So when you look at that path they took and study it, it will bring you to the island of the Hispaniola and basically Central, North, and South America. So let me get this here. And then eventually, when the times came, roughly 1492, um, they were established. They tried to keep their laws, statutes, and commandments to the best of their ability. Then eventually they failed because they had um, so many mixed in doctrines from um, starting from Jeroboam, the idols, and having the doctrine of the Assyrians. Um, Let me get some scriptures in Hosea, because Hosea explains heavy about Northern Kingdom's idolatry. Bear with me one moment. Every day and in every season, bacteria get on our hands. These so-called Puerto Ricans, Latino, Cubans, Mexicans, El Salvadorians, Guatemalans, Asher, Brazilians, Colombians, Venezuelans. If your father's lineage goes back to D the house, see this one. Booking.com has all kinds of stays because a city hotel is right for some. And one of the reasons why you were pretty much how you say banished from your history, because one thing you always did here, and I've been around Judah, been around Ephraim, Simeon, a little bit of Manasseh, and I grew up around so-called Mexicans and El Salvadorians. But my point of saying all this, my main points I used to hear of like some type of strength was, the Black Power, the Boricua. I used to hear that heavy, Boricua, and everybody that's from New York, they know about it. I even heard it in Puerto Rico at some time, but not as vast as what you would hear it in your northern region parts of America, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, whatever, where those so-called Puerto Ricans dwell. Dominicans, and then I heard you would hear the Aztec thing with the certain so-called Mexicans. And when you go into the garments and some of their ordinances, it all goes back to the fact that you know, their worship of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh, but ignorantly. Let me see what this says. All right, so Hosea in the Hosea 3. This is in the James. Let me see what it says. So the Lord said to me, "Go again and show your love for a woman who is committing adultery with a lover. You must love her just as I still love the people of Israel, even though they turn to other gods and like to take offerings of." Oh, let me get the NLT. This shit sounds stupid. certain certain translations sounding wild. So this is an NLT. Hosea's wife is redeemed, meaning Israel to the back coming back to the Lord. Then the Lord said to me, "Wine." Then I said to her, "You must live in my house for many days and stop your prostitution. During this time, you will not have sexual relations with anyone, not even with me." Meaning how pretty much the Lord was going to disdain the northern kingdom and eventually all the house of Israel. But it says this shows that Israel will go a long time without a king or prince and without sacrifices, sacred pillars, priests, or even idols. But afterward, the people will return and devote themselves to the Lord, their power, and to David's descendant, their king in the last days. They will tremble in awe of the Lord and of his goodness. So what's happening is, you know, we eventually knew and remember how Northern Kingdom got slaughtered. And I'm going to bring this out in the chat GPT. It goes into a good breakdown of the atrocities happened to our people. And our Northern Kingdom was trampled down. And what you're going to see eventually, and I know when you see it, it kind of, we all know if you've been around so-called Latinos and Hispanics, their fucking arrogance and pride is just like on another, and their simplicity is like on another fucking level. And it's kind of, I'm not gonna lie to you, my I grew up, I got half of my family's from Cuba, and I've been around these fucking so-called Latinos, man, and I don't have the typical so-called Latino look. So basically, I was too. I'm gonna tell you my strengths in this world was, um, cause my mother was Judah. Now, I wasn't black enough and I wasn't Latino enough, so I was in a straight. That's pretty much my that was my upbringing. But I had both the affliction and the curses of both of the tribes. So one thing I always say, those arguments about what Esau did, I tell him, man, I've been double fucked. So where was I, Salaki? Let me see where I was, Salaki. All over the place. Oh, so yeah, we all know when growing up. No, Salaki, if you've seen so-called Latinos and Hispanics growing up around them, they suffer identity crisis and that how you say their way of being. You really will look at them like heathens, and you're basically what I'm saying is you'll see why the Lord kept Southern Kingdom and then disregarded the Northern Kingdom because you can clearly see their demeanor, how the way they act is demonic as hell, and you would so. I say all that to say this. It's a reason why out of all the people in the world, you have so-called Arabs who so-called blew up the Twin Towers and is always causing hell and catastrophe against America. You would think they would be like the main criminal, bad people. But and it's funny because when I go build and go amongst these building developments, those so-called Arabs are one of the biggest people who buy those homes. Them East Indians, those so-called Chinese and so-called Arabs. Only people you see building them is Northern Kingdom. Like that saying is, we create and we build shit that we would never ever ever be able to inhabit or live in. We create it, we build it, and then we disregard it. So I say all that to say this: how in the hell is that we made America great? We built up America. We were ravaged, devastated, slaughtered, raped, robbed, and murdered. But here it is. All we doing is trying to live, and and one thing for certain, Esau set up this drug thing, this drug ring, which a lot of that crop comes from. It was is grown in South America in the places of those regions. But how the way Esau set it up for that trafficking to come, because Esau loves cocaine. But it's kind of funny how we are pretty much the face of criminality, and we're the problem of the earth. But when you look at the main culprit, it's the so-called white man. And how in the hell Russians aren't even look Russians can move in your neighborhood. Russians can pretty much linger around, and they're not a threat. So-called Arabs have their own stores, vape shops now, and they're not looked at as a threat. But they so-called bombed, and they're the face of Tism. But they're not looked at as a threat. We are looked at as a threat. This is why the main focal point of ICE right now is who? Northern Kingdom. I find that very ironic. Now, Salaki for the rant. This is ChatGPT. What atrocity happened to the Taino Indians of the islands by the Europeans? We know them to be Ephraimites. So the Taino people of the Caribbean islands, including Hispaniola, modern Haiti, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Jamaica, and the Bahamas, because you still have those so-called Indian people there. And eventually they brought over what? The Southern Kingdom. So pretty much, yes, you have intermingling of Edomites, so-called blacks, and so-called Indians. But again, it all goes back to your father's lineage. To whomever your father is, that's who you are. Um, Again, it's a heavy identical crisis amongst these regions. So, suffered devastating atrocities after the arrival of Europeans, beginning with Christopher Columbus in 1492. What happened to them is widely regarded by historians as one of the earliest and clearest examples of colonial genocide in the Americas. But here it is. These people still aren't labeled as criminals. And it's funny, when you go to the Puerto Rico in Old San Juan, matter of fact, it's a big ass statue of Christopher Columbus. And I remember looking at it and seeing it. I remember looking at it and saying, yo, why isn't this shit been knocked the fuck down? But when you go amongst the island of Puerto Rico, it's a big divide amongst the so-called Puerto Ricans there. Gang activity, um, fighting for turf, drugs, etc. The land is very divided, but I find it very ironic they still left that so-called, that not the so-called, but Christopher Columbus statue up, even in Dominican Republic. I believe what's that word? Zona Colonia. I think it's Zona Colonial in Dominican Republic. You go down, you walk down the street, and you go to the main. It's a I forgot the what you call it, but it's a big ass Christopher Columbus statue there too. Now, and it's still up there, you standing up tall. Let me see something. I'm gonna show you the picture. In old San Juan. Yep. And Plaza Colon, standing high and strong. And that's in Puerto Rico. I remember seeing it. Let me see something. Get a better picture. Yep, that's in Puerto Rico. Standing there strong, not knocked down. But when you go to the islands of Puerto Rico, it's a lot of division, a lot of gang violence, a lot of death, a lot of murder, homicides. But they left that up. Northern Kingdom loved their oppressors. So go back. That's very that's that's something. How you say? Esau's a bad boy. He's able to slaughter you, and this was in 1492, and it's still up to this day. People always say, "Oh my God, this was so long time. This was a long time ago. This was far fetched. Why are we still worrying about it?" Well, that's what Esau does. That's how good Esau is. That's how much of a master of disguise he is, a fugitive. So, one, mass killing and violent repression. Spanish conquistadors used extreme violence to suppress Taino resistance. Taino people were killed by swords, lances, crossbows, firearms, attack dogs, and mass executions. Entire villages were burned, and people were massacred to instill fear. Forced labor and enslavement. There you go. Y'all were slaves too. The Spanish imposed encomienda encomienda system, which effectively enslaved the Taino. I gotta remember that. They were forced to mine gold under brutal conditions, work on plantations, carry heavy loads over long distances. And all you gotta do is get the book Devastation of the Indies, and it'll tell you all about this. And it'll tell you the people who did this were Christians. Failure to meet labor quotas often resulted in a mutilation, whipping, or execution, including cutting off hands. Starvation and social collapse. Forced labor prevented Taino communities from farming their own food. Spanish seizure of land and resources caused widespread famine. And one thing, you know, them fucking so-called Latinos, man, they love that basically calling themselves Spanish or white. One thing for certain too, if you don't speak that fucking language Spanish, they look at you like a fake ass Latino. So it's just so much. It's too much, man. It's too much. And you're not even Spanish. You're not even Spanish is a language. It's easy to trap them fucking dummies, man. But this is our people. They're fucking foolish. Isaiah 1 and 3, you know? Our people are retarded as hell. Here it is, you're calling yourself by a language. Um, you're not a real Latino if you don't speak Spanish. And these are the things you go through. You know, Spanish use of land resources cause widespread famine. Traditional social, political, and family structures were deliberately broken apart. 4. Sexual violence and family destruction. Taino women and girls were frequently raped or taken as concubines. Families were separated. Many children were taken or died from neglect and abuse. Some women practiced infanticide or suicide to prevent their children from suffering enslavement. But they're not criminals, right? And this is and look, and to this day, look at how Esau devastates those islands and those, Central America and South America. One of the reasons why those places are poor and impoverished and oppressed is because of the so-called white man. He sends those um, economy hitmen to take your resources, sets up legislations and laws that keep our people from, you know. And I was thinking about them. I'm like, yo, how the fuck here? They claim and talk about their poor countries, but here it is. These are the main builders of America. These people come, even the woman, and honestly, today on those construction sites, it's the so-called Latino men and women, Hispanic men and women, and the women are operating those big bulldozers, heavy equipment, machinery, loading up trucks, excavating, etc. That woman is doing that now, But you ask yourself, damn, they're doing all this building here. Why couldn't they do that back in their home? Where they come from. Well, you know why? Because the so-called white man has a big hand in their oppression and being poor. But again, so-called white man does no wrong. He's not the criminal. But it says disease number 5, disease at a catastrophic weapon though unintentional. Europeans brought diseases such as smallpox, measles, influenza, and typhus. The Taino had no immunity, leading to massive epidemics. Disease alone killed the majority of the population, often within a single generation. 6. Cultural erasure. There you go. Taino religion, language, and traditions were suppressed. This is why no that the last honestly the last part the last because I don't even hear it no more. That whole Boricua thing, I don't even hear that. I don't hear that shit no more. That was that was the 90s. That the last part of anything Taino, Boricua, Arawak, Aztec, Inca, Mayan. That shit was the 90s. The 80s and 90s. And that was the last of it. This new generation, done for. Or these so-called Puerto Ricans and these new Latino generation, Hispanic generation of kids, they're done for. They don't know shit. All they know and all they believe is they're Spanish and their language and they're white. Because again, cultural erasure was heavy amongst Northern Kingdom. Oh man, that's crazy. Yeah, my man chat. So I'm gonna read this again. This is 6 in the chat GPT of the devastation of Taino, so-called Taino Indians. Taino religion, language, and tradition were suppressed. Forced conversion to Christianity occurred. Yeah, you Christian got a whole lot of explaining to do. Like your boy Sarnetta. Really Hebrew, you got a lot of explaining to do, goddamn it. Forced conversion to Christianity occurred. Igneous leaders, caciques, were executed or humiliated to dismantle resistance. 7. Population collapse, genocide. Estimates suggest that within 50 to 100 years, the Taino population declined by 80-95%, and in some islands, nearly 100%. Bartolome de las Casas, a Spanish priest who witnessed events. So this is all documented, This is all documented. You can look up Bartolome de las Casas. You got a book, Devastation of the Indies. Described the destruction as deliberate, systematic, and cruel. So, a little bit of history on northern tribes, so-called Puerto Ricans, Cubans, um, Jamaica, the Bahamas, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and the history that has been erased. They don't teach, and the fact that you so-called Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Dominicans, Jamaicans, Bahamians, etc. Y'all are all Hebrew Israelites. One of the reasons why y'all suffer is because of the curses. And these curses were to take our people and make us wonder. And then eventually, your wondering, your yearning would eventually lead. Well, this really is the Spirit of the Lord will eventually grasp hold onto you and allow you to come across this truth through Yahweh Shah, because through Yahweh Shah, this gospel, this ministry, this mystery has been given only to the elect. You see, this is the history that they don't want. They want, the so-called white man pretty much wants to be looked at as a hero or a god. So, he does. You don't look at him as a criminal, but this nigga is the criminal, man. Here it is. They're talking about bowing down to their laws, their rules. You're the criminal. You've been. Here it is. They destroyed your lands, and then when you try to come over for betterment and the opportunity, they look at you like a criminal. And everything that they criminalized and made you and destroyed your image, they did it. And they got some nerve to say, you're the problem. Nah, Esau, you're the fucking problem. But Lord's we was edified. With that, we say shalom.